imscoffy. In this video, I'm here to talk about this game, my map, and my process. Furry Tower Defense is a 3D tower defense game. My inspirations are games like Deltarune, Bloons Tower Defense, and Star Fox, and the work my friends have been producing, like Jackie and Contract Rush, and many others. During the pandemic, I played Women Tower Defense on Roblox. Though I thought the game was fun, I saw some things I felt could be changed that spun into inspiration for another tower defense game. What started as a side project then became a more full-time affair. But to be more original, I took inspiration from a different demographic. It also helps that I'm part of this demographic. So, who am I? This devlog or dialogue is about my game, but my life has influenced my game's themes, so it might be good to touch on that briefly. My own cultural heritage has been an influence, but the surface level aesthetics are few and far between, save for a few designs. A lot of the smaller cultural ideas and bigger superstitious ones have influenced my world building and character traits. Some of this happened without noticing, but it's become a more intentional choice as I continued working on this game. Another influence has actually been my journey as a trans woman. Largely, the game is about a journey or transition of some kind, but it's also about the tackling of identity and self-acceptance. I'll leave it to players to see how I unfold that in the finalized game, though. Now, I could go on, but I'm a shy girl, so I prefer to keep to myself. Hopefully this helps provide some context of where this game comes from. Now, this game is regrettably made in Unity. She's not pretty, but I'll start and end on this engine for now. Though I can code myself, my friend Sam assists occasionally with back-end dirty work that I don't have the chops to do, like rewriting the movement code or cleaning up how the pathing works. The code I write is more game developer code and not necessarily software developer code, if you know what I mean. I use Blender for most things 3D and Clip Studio Paint for most things 2D. I don't have some big budget, so I've gone for the options cheapest and most convenient for my own workflow. Most asset in this game is billboard, which is common in even modern games now, but I use extensively in older fashions for foliage, characters, enemies, etc. It's undeniably become a core part of the game's aesthetic. So the 3D model development load on this game is actually quite small. This has let me iterate on ideas very quickly in the editor. I think everyone needs a shitty language you can speak when you need to make temporary assets. Something you can bang out quickly to iterate ideas or draw outlines before you fill in the shapes. When I block out dialogue, I care less about the grammar than the sentiments expressed, you know? That kind of thing. Almost every asset in this game is just a further iterated and fancier version of that language. I want a character in a 3D space, I just draw them. I want a foliage, I draw it. It's just that easy for a girl like me. Though it started as a more by-the-book tower defense game, Furry Tower Defense has definitely morphed into something different over time. The first change I made was the ability to throw towers during the round. I envisioned them as individual characters with their own stories and personalities, a little like the heroes from Bloons Tower Defense 6. This was partly because I was interested in questioning the disposability of units typically seen in the tower defense genre. I wanted to have players attached to the personalities, but also I thought it'd be a good opportunity to focus in on writing dialogue, which has been one of my oldest interests in game development. World building and character stories are a really easy way for me to engage with the work I make, but I care a lot about the presentation of the story in the world, so that it doesn't just end up looking like a wall of text to the player. And so, everyone with you has a story. In between levels of the game, you can interact with these lives briefly in various ways. This gameplay is rooted in the tower defense genre. In each map, there are a series of waves you have to get through in order to win and stay ahead of the horde of beasts that are chasing you. But the twist is, if the enemies break the protective casing of the crystal, the thing you're defending, you have to grab all your guys, shove them in the van, and go, or someone might be left behind. If you leave someone, you've got to go back and pick them up, wasting precious time and bringing the horde closer to you. No agent is disposable. You can throw towers anywhere you want at any time, but at the end of each round they teleport to where you put them at the start of the last one. This throw mechanic was one of my biggest departures from the tower defense genre, because it makes your job about managing things on the ground while the wave happens. I wanted to make the rounds in my game more active and involved, so that the player would have to work on their positioning and movement or risk being overwhelmed. This mechanic was a really early part of the design, so I will keep it with me. It came while I was experimenting with some of the basic ideas I had, trying to find a way for the player to be more active during the rounds. The physical action of just picking them up with your grubby little hands made me really happy. I think this game has a lot of dry humor in it, and it ended up being a kind of comedy that was also good for gameplay too. Some characters might be more or less receptive to being thrown around though, so be careful. This map has been scrapped. Her design is old and predates the current version of the gameplay. It's almost fully done and went through several iterations before reaching the current one. However, polishing it was not entirely a bad decision. It helped me understand the standard of quality I wanted for my maps and the design elements that helped the game come together, like the visible path geometry on the level. I had to eventually end up with these ideas, so doing it on this map was good for hashing it out. Here's another old map. The movement mechanics were different back then, and this on the chopping board. I don't use many Unity add-ons, so a lot of my blocking out work is done with just regular cubes that I resize and reshape to my liking, as you can see. Because it's so cumbersome, I've been looking into other alternatives like blockout. I'll report back on my preferences as this go along. This was also used to test the grapple hook mechanic, which was in its infancy then and still needs revision. Because of the newest map I'm working on, I've been on burnout since February when I was trying to meet the deadline for Steam Next Fest. I realized this was not a great idea, and after crunching myself for an entire month, I canceled the demo release. This is for a pretty simple reason. The game was basically nowhere near completion at that state, and releasing a single vertical slice to my entire audience was a great way to get my game forgotten about when it was to be released however many years after. I stopped actively working on the game for the next 6 months due to a combination of declining mental health and social problems I was experiencing. It took a while to feel ready to work on this again, but I learned to be much more forgiving to myself. I like to think that I'm over being perfectionist, but it's true that I still care a lot about the quality of work. Letting go of that, allowing my work to be less than perfect, is instrumental to continuing development on any game. Part of this burnout was caused by the standards and expectations I had for my environmental design. My maps were too complex, and creating such intricate detail for every map seemed like a great path to burnout again, so I'm making executive decision to make maps look more minimum viable product for now. When I finish the routing for the whole game, I'll walk back and polish them to my liking, but for now, I want a released game, not 5 pretty maps. I hope you understand. Currently, I'm working on the skeleton of the overall game. I think a lot of people tend to focus on the small scale in gameplay, but the arc of the game itself is something that I have to focus on at this moment, since I already have a lot of the gameplay honed already. When I do this, I get to be able to play from start to end of my game and tinker with overall arcs much sooner than if I waited to stitch it all together when it's done. I think the tangibility of that architecture is really important, especially to morale. Whatever small thing you're working on is just part of a larger project. When I was starting out, the worst part of development was the incredible amount of scope creep that occurred early on. My previous project and future game, Mori no Concerto, was greatly victim to this, though I've gotten better with this in time. One of the most important things about game development, I feel, is setting a goal for a game to accomplish, and doing only the things it takes to accomplish that goal first. Knowing exactly what you're trying to accomplish with a game can be difficult, which is what experimentation and prototyping is most important for. It's also really important to understand how much work something takes and how necessary it is to the core identity of the game. I've had to be vicious before in cutting out things. It was originally going to have a bunch of mini games and like a weapon system. Always understand what you're trying to make. I think I've said my piece. As far as development goes, I'm very evergreen, but this is what I've learned so far after the year and a half this game's been in development. I'm also new to making videos like this, so I'd like to see if there's any interest in further continuing this series, so sharing would be appreciated. I'm available here, and there is a Steam page live. It's quite outdated though, so in some further push, I will include trailer and updated information. Thank you all for your support so far. I hope to return with more updates in the future as I plug away at this game. I'm Scoffy, and I'll see you next time.